feature presentation.
Baltasar, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it, and apologies for being a little bit late.
No. Nice to meet you, Eric.
It's always really wonderful getting to talk to not only a really wonderful filmmaker, but somebody that really appreciates the time to record audio commentaries. And I wanted to start with an audio commentary that you did with Everest. And there's something that you said that I think I'd like to know a little bit more about in terms of how maybe it relates to touch. You mentioned that truth and authenticity is really important to you in terms of telling stories. And when it comes to narratives that focus on real life characters, you have to bring that authenticity and truth. Does that truth and authenticity play within the part of making the characters believable in a fictional sort of setting in terms of how you play with fictional characters?
Absolutely, and in the same way, you just look into other sources and look at other ways, and it's also authentic to the story itself, authentic to the book, So I think authenticity has so many kind of layers, and one of them is, for example, language. In this case, and it's not always possible, obviously, but in this case, it was very important to me that this film would be, the character would speak in the language that they would speak in a real situation. So therefore, it's in Icelandic, Japanese, and English. Yeah.
Was that translation something for you that was exciting to explore as much as the filmmaking in terms of even how the characters explore the sort of intimacies of their own relationships?
Yes, absolutely, and of course, authenticity doesn't only go to the language; it goes to the cultural background of the character, as when you are telling a story that's mostly based on relationships and cultural crossing, then that's really where your attention goes to, and I really enjoyed doing that. It wasn't about the how is to live in 5,000 meter above sea level. It's about how is to live in that time and be in that situation. So yes, absolutely. And authenticity authenticity is also homework. It's that you turn every stone. It doesn't mean you use everything, but you search for the knowledge and the background and everything you can possibly use in the situation.
Did working with Ólaf Ólafsson, the author of the book, in terms of creating the original draft for the screenplay and even just kind of fleshing out the characters, give that backstory, that aspects that maybe aren't used in the film, but gave you kind of direction of who the characters were, certain motivations for the part?
I think it definitely helped. They have a saying, and do not work with children, animals, and novelists. It's pretty much no. But I have had bad experience in trying to write a screenplay with actually more than one author, and it just didn't work. We had to abandon the project. So, but knowing that Oliver, had an insight to the film, he's been involved, in the film, though he hasn't directed one, in his career. And I had read screenplay that he had written out of one of his books, and it was, wasn't perfect, but it was really good. So I thought us together we would be a good combination, and luckily it turned out to be one of the best writers relationship I've had with writers in general on a project, not only novelists but writers. And he was very adamant and clear about that. It was my movie. Was fine, and so most of the changes where we, kind of go away from the book are my ideas, obviously, but he was more than willing to work on them, and I think that helped to so it doesn't to kind of have an overall consistent tone, to the, and it's very and it's very authentic again to the book, even though there are some changes that are maybe more drastic than it might seem.
Was there anything in the writing process that you had to lose, or even when you were making the movie, that you kind of felt was a hard choice, or something that you wanted in the film that maybe didn't make the cut?
Yeah, there's always kill your darlings, things, and it is for like the grade of the whole, like you do it because the movie will benefit from it. Not only scenes that I had shot that I had to take out, but also when you're writing it. I mean, there are relationships, like for example, in the book, there's, you know, the guy he's, you know, his schoolmate who is having kind of the fight with about politics. He meets him on the street many years later in Iceland, and he's the same asshole, you know, and like hasn't changed at all. And it's nice, but it just didn't fit in the kind of the road movie element of it, and it wasn't really, you know, I think it wouldn't have added necessarily anything. But in a novel, it was a nice little note. So the thing, and also sometimes you also take things and move them around, so you find another place for them in a different form, so you get the element without, you know. So yeah, there's quite a, you know, bit of that, but yeah.
Oh, and you certainly see that relationship even later on in the story when Christopher, you know, meets them again in Nepal and in the restaurant, and they're still kind of the same, but also very, you know, they're not very sensitive to the story matter in terms of how Hiroshima plays a role in this. And that's something I wanted to ask you about, because obviously it's something recently that's come up in conversation because of, you know, something like Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. And I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on that film, but specifically, what was your approach to handling such sensitive subject matter and considering, you know, where you start in terms of research?
Yeah, so I hadn't seen Nolan's film when I made mine, you know, but just watched it recently, just because I kind of thought you might get a question like this. So I wanted to see it, you know, and I actually think it's a beautiful and really fantastic, well-made film. It's telling a story from a totally different aspect. And I think he does that, you know, I think it's his best film, by the way, you know, and of course, when you deal with such difficult matters, there's always going to be a controversy around it. There's no way around that. You know, people are going to have different feelings about it. Yeah, some people feel maybe that it was too much of a glory for Oppenheimer, you know, and not enough focus on the victims. I choose a very different path, you know, in telling the story, and it's not because I'm have any way countering him, because as I said, I hadn't seen it, but for me, it's like I wanted to take the audience by the hand and lead them to a very narrow path, and focusing on one victim that wasn't even alive when the bomb happened, right?
Right.
And that way, it's not participate in the shouting and blaming game of who did what and what, did this end the war, didn't it end the war, you know, was this necessary, wasn't it necessary? And I have all my feelings about that. But in the film, you know, sometimes I feel if you tell somebody in a gentle way and allow space to think, then you might actually affect people strongly in some way, that rather than blaming and shouting, because we always end up in this, and you know this in America, all these kind of polarizing, you know, fights. And I just thought this would be, and I loved the way the book did it, and I wanted to stay with that, you know, but at the same time, because of the dangers that we are facing in the world today, and this is something for somebody like me who's kind of, I am brought up under the threat of the Cold War, you know, on an atomic bomb. You know, I remember when I saw, was it The Last Day, or what is it called? It was just a.
Well, there was The Day After, there's
The Day After,
Threads, there's
yeah,
Testament. Yeah, all those
yeah,
movies that came out like in the 80s, late
yeah. I
70s,
mean,
early
I started
80s.
shivering and crying. I mean, it wasn't a very good movie, but it's just like the thought of this would be happening. So I wanted to kind of hopefully reunite that, you know, kind of just people realize there's not only the bombing itself, is what comes after it, you know, and I love what Christopher Kieslowski said, and I always, it's like he said, so I quote him, that genius.
You want to have a conversation with the
Yes,
world.
yes, yeah. I'm not trying to change it. I'm trying to have a conversation with him. So you're well versed in your, you know. I never told anyone this story, and they actually can answer have the punch the line. So well done, man.
Oh, thank you. You know, well, I was watching interviews with you and having those conversations, and, you know, what you're talking about with the non-judgmental aspect of filmmaking and sort of looking at it from the perspective of, you know, it's for you to interpret, but also the generational trauma of one generation, you know, putting it upon the next and feeling the weight of that. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, I was curious to know how your thoughts were about your son playing Palmy, or your son Palmy playing Christopher, specifically how did you see Christopher once your son was cast in the younger version of that role?
I mean, wasn't my idea, by the way. But I hadn't found, and through the casting director, hadn't found the right actor, you know, and she suggested, what about your sons? And I have like 3 sons, and 2 of them were in the right age for it. And the oldest one is an actor, was in Chernobyl and other things. And then you know, the younger one has played, you know, was in The Deep, but Palme had been in like in the Reykjavik Rotterdam playing my son, which I didn't direct, and was the choice of the director. And then he hadn't really acted since then. You know, he opened one door, bare-chested in The Deep, like, you know, like there's a trunk at the door or something like that. That was about it. So I honestly thought that he wasn't into it at all. So I said to Selma, you know, but you call him, because I don't want to say no for him. I would be wrong. You know, and she called him, and then suddenly a few weeks later he showed up on my you know, at my office, and I was like, "What are you doing? Are we meeting today or what?" I said, "No, I'm coming for an audition." So I was like, "What?" And then he just blew everyone away. And this is like, this happens when you just know that somebody sits well in the role. And what you always wish for when you're casting is that the baseline of the character is as close to the baseline of the actor as possible. So anything that the actor does and he can do freely will be drawn from that base, rather than now I have to shift my baseline over here, and everything I do is, you know, often it's contrived, or, you know, doesn't come, especially when you're playing in a really, really low-key way. And that's really what I wanted, because I wanted to give them the space to develop the love without it. It's not about sex, or it's not about, it's about, it's a sensuality, not sexuality. And that's what I want for, and that comes with allowing the time, allowing to see their eyes, allowing to see the little tweaks in their faces. So yeah, I was, that's really why I cast him, and it's also in a weird way, and that was not the conscious decision, but once you're there doing it, it becomes very personal, you know. It's almost like you are injecting yourself in a weird way into a role, which all filmmakers do, by the way, in some sort of way. So,
well, I'm also curious because, I mean, you know, for people that don't know, I mean, you started as an actor. You're also, you know, a director of theater. So watching your son, was there anything that you learned from him as an actor, you know, on the screen for the first time? And you also mentioned one of your other sons, Stormur, who is also, I believe, a set dresser for this film.
yeah, he was working, you know, as a set dresser. He's the one who has played, and he's now in the drama school in Iceland. He just got accepted to that, the academy. So yes, I learned. Yes, I think in some way Palme did better than I've done, to be honest, as an actor, because he was so relaxed and he played it so close to the chest, you know, that I just couldn't see the acting at some, you know, most of the time. And I think that is the magic of acting in a weird way, you know, like, is that it's impossible to see the seams, you know, the how it's put together. And I was like, God damn, I wish I had done that when I was starting. I could have been that totally relaxed. So yes, I did. And also it's something very, and I want to say this because people think, you know, like putting your kid in a movie and, you know, nepotism and all that, which is, you know, obviously is in a way, but I did put him through the test and had everyone, you know, focus and everyone look at him without knowing he was my son. And it was a unanimous decision that he was right for the role. So then I revealed it, you know. But it was more important to me, to be totally honest. I mean, films are incredibly important to me and my work, but my children are more, you know. And I was more concerned about putting him in a position which would affect his life in a negative way, rather than it would affect my film in a negative way. And that is just, the father in me is bigger than the director in the end of the day. It wasn't always like that. It's become like that, you know, over time. So that's another thing I was really concerned about, not putting him into something, you know, like we all know, like Sofia Coppola had to deal with for a while after The Godfather, you know.
Well, even Nick Cage, right? I mean, he changed his name from Nicholas Coppola to Cage.
But these kids often have talent for a reason, and you know, and I don't. But as I say, this is the why he came to do this. But I was going to say that at the same time, it's incredibly gratifying to meet your child professionally, you know, and work. And you have to put the father away, you have to put the son away, you know, and now you're two creative personalities, I have to respect him the same way I respect Denzel Washington when I work with him, you know.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, ask him, you know, put the same pressure on him. And it is, you meet your child as an adult, and it's really, really, you know, yeah, it's great.
I wanted to ask one technical question that there's a shot in this movie that I really love, and it's when Christopher, the older version of Christopher, played by Egil Olafsson, is looking into the Nippon, which has now become a tattoo parlor, and it's almost like there's this conversation, this non-dialogue conversation going on between the past and the present. And so, on a cinematography aspect and a visual aspect, what was the process like in sort of telling that story, not only from the period landscape in terms of going back in time and into the present, but also looking from the perspective of somebody's memory fading? Were there aspects of that that you wanted to tell in a non-dialogue kind of way?
Yeah, I think more than his memory is fading, as it was more about, I was not trying to do the father, you know, like he is so far into Alzheimer, which was a wonderful film with Anthony Hopkins. But it's more for me that once you get diagnosed by something like that, it starts to kind of worry you that it might be happening. And when is it happening? And I, for example, you know, when you just get a bit older, like you get 50, like me, like you start remembering names of actors, you know, like, or like you can remember all of them. And you can know, do I have something going on with my brain? And it's natural. So in the case, like when he can, you know, remember the haiku, you know, that he gets like, shit, is it coming? And you have no idea. You're entering a space you haven't been there before. Therefore, you know, and I was more about that. But it's nice that you talk about the time, because for me, this film is not about as much about a man, you know, trying to ignite his first love, which he's not trying at all. He's trying to get a closure, and it's how we deal with time, you know, and our relationship with time. And I remember because my father is from Spain, so when I was a child, I went to visit Spain. I went down the coast of, you know, the Spanish coast, and in my view as a child, it was just like an absolute dream, you know. It was as Spanish as anything could be. Later on, when I was, you know, closer to 30, I traveled down there, and it was just like a tourist dump. And and it's just like this, the pain of seeing your memory being just taken away from you, and then you're not 100% sure. And was it like I had created it in my mind, you know, or was it like a fantasy that I had created that was based on some of its reality, but not the full? So I think, and there's nothing like when he looks at the window, and I love it, and it really was important to me never to talk about it. You just see the building, and you see inside of it, and this is very normal. You know, places change like that in 5 years, you know, but when it's connected to your memory, it is really painful, you know, and you see your, you know, the home you've been brought up in or something now is a car sales shop or whatever they changed it, or computer you know, shop, and it's just like time, you know. And then I think, you know, like and that's one of what really gets me when I watch the film, to be honest. And I don't, to be shy about saying this, but it's got me a couple of times. It is that how time, you know, kind of, it's the kind of sweet sour relationship you have with time, you know.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. You know, listening to you talk about the film, it'd be great to talk even longer, but you know, getting these insights, you appreciate the movie even more. And I think it is one of the most kind of beautiful and melancholic endings, I think, in this year. So thank you so much for sharing your
Wonderful,
thoughts
thank
with
you.
me.
I appreciate that.